Good to be here with you today. Cooper and I did this last year as well. I think we were both together, and so maybe we'll just make this the new tradition. What I want to walk through is some research that we've done around e-tailers and retailers. The question that we set out to answer was, what are those companies demanding from shipping companies in particular, and we were looking at a very specific segment, so trying to go small, the small, medium, and large. And when we talk about large businesses in this study, we're talking about, I think it's 250 employees, roughly. So we're targeting a very narrow population here of the small businesses and trying to answer the question, if you want to gain market share with that group in particular, what would you need to do? So I'll run through this quickly, so we have lots of time for questions at the end. Just a little bit about it, about the research, and all these slides will be available online. I've got some eye charts here, so I apologize in advance for those. So the first, what we're seeing, you're seeing this is a no-brainer slide, e-commerce growing and growing quickly. You can see the countries that we looked at and how that balances out across those countries. Cross-border also growing quickly. Our expectation, as you look at this, is it's going to be growing at roughly 27% over the next few years. This is some research that we did with Alibaba last year. As you look at that growth in cross-border e-commerce, the bulk of it, right, roughly 75% of that is coming from new consumers trying cross-border for the first time. And what that means is we're starting to see, as we pull this research through with Alibaba, what we're finding is that there's a very different expectation from those new consumers. They expect their cross-border e-commerce to be just like their domestic e-commerce, and they are very different experiences right now. We're seeing a lot of people that are experiencing it for the first time and coming back and saying, that's just not going to fly. You're going to have to change that experience. So a lot of investment going on around cross-border. Marketplaces and the growth of marketplaces, 81% of the companies that we talked with use marketplaces for a good portion of their revenue. And as you look at what's happening with marketplaces and the growth of marketplaces, one of the things that we're finding is that there's a very significant trend toward expansion of these marketplaces up and down that supply chain. So Amazon, for example, when you use their fulfillment capabilities, they improve your ranking in the search results. Those sorts of exchanges between marketplaces and the companies that are listing on these marketplaces is they're trying to drive more and more of their services through that marketplace. Our expectation is that will continue. And what we're seeing is that it's starting to crowd these small players. They're seeing some definite challenges. If you look at the last stat there, roughly, or not roughly, 80%, those that had 80% or more of their sales coming from a marketplace over the last year and a half, we're seeing declines or very flat e-commerce. So in a place where we're seeing significant e-commerce growth, those that have relied heavily on marketplaces aren't finding that growth. They're actually starting to see some shrinkage. When you look at speed, we're seeing a lot of investment in speed, and this, when we peeled this back a little bit, one of the things that we found is the investment in speed is coming from non-traditional sources. I'm sure you'll hear a lot of that. I think tomorrow we've got even a couple of those companies coming in to talk about those models. I was with one last week. It's a little company that's based in Silicon Valley, like they all seem to be these days. These logistics new entrants, and their aspiration was astounding. He was walking me through the economics, but they are basically sourcing a domestic network, nationwide domestic network. They will have no assets. That's their aspiration. They've got models that knit these networks together and a big analytics engine that churns the whole thing and puts it together. And their growth has been phenomenal. And the reason that they're growing so quickly is because they can come in at a very different price point. So these sorts of models are what we're seeing evolve, and they are primarily focused on price and speed. From a use of different providers, one of the things that we're finding is that everybody's using multiple providers. Usually they have two. Here in the US, that wasn't any different. And when you talk to them about why they're using these different providers, it's about typically about price competition and redundancy. So now a little bit about where we're seeing some issues and the impact of those issues. What you see on the bottom here is the frequency of the issue and the level of negative impact on the left there. So those that are most impactful, not necessarily frequently happening, but most impactful are damage and being late. Pretty obvious. Those that we're seeing at the highest frequency are around being able to deliver when the person is around. Not as negative as an impact, clearly, but that's where we're seeing the biggest problem. And so investments are tending to follow those problems, and we're seeing a lot of investment right now in the shipping companies and being able to change the home delivery experience and making that a very controllable experience, particularly on a mobile device. So now the eye charts. What you see here is the importance of the factors that we looked at along the bottom and the level of satisfaction with the primary provider along the left there. And I've pulled out a few of these that I think are interesting. So the one that has the least importance and least satisfaction is providing additional fulfillment capabilities and being able to expand up and down that supply chain as far as how they're making the decision of who to source. If you look at those that are of importance but lowest satisfaction, it's around customs form creation and that cross-border experience. Similarly, around tracking and providing an easy returns sort of solution. And then if you go up to the top to where we see the highest overall satisfaction and relative importance, it's that geographic coverage. Again, we're looking at just these small to medium businesses. If you break it down a little bit and look at just the small businesses, one of the things that I find interesting, if you're trying to think about the chart overall, is it tends to follow the path that you would expect, right? So as importance grows, satisfaction grows. We've got the carriers focused on the right things for small businesses, and they cluster up in the upper right. So small businesses tend to be very satisfied with the shippers that they're using. When you look at what's least important and least satisfaction, after hours and the ability to get things in different times. If you move to the right here a little bit, it's about customs again, and small businesses in particular are finding that process frustrating. And then the things that are going well for these small businesses are payment capabilities, the different options that are enabled by their shipper for payment. If you look at the medium businesses, you find that there's less clustering and more in that bottom right quadrant. Medium businesses are a little more challenged than the small businesses. So the first there, providing a global trade wizard, less important to the medium businesses, and very low satisfaction. What's interesting is that you look at what is high importance and low satisfaction. It's around cross-border again. I haven't quite understood why that wizard was so unimportant, but the customs process and total landed cost is so much more important and so low on the satisfaction. And then as far as what's going well, for the medium businesses, it's the returns process. They feel like they've got a pretty good returns process in place. This flips on the next group here. And so what you see for the larger businesses is we've got a lot more in that bottom left quadrant and a lot less overall satisfaction. And so as you're growing in size with the primary provider, what we're finding is they're less happy and more likely to be switching. So what's in the bottom there? Offering tools for integration. These types of businesses aren't very satisfied but don't feel that integration is very important. Integration becomes much more important as you get further up this stack. From what's going poorly and very important, it's the returns process. And again, a flip from what we saw from the medium businesses, as these companies are finding a harder and harder returns process with their shipper. And then what's going well is that process for international shipping, the cross-border. And where we're seeing the most growth in cross-border is in these smaller companies. Where we're seeing the most investment in cross-border is in the larger companies that you see here. So some things to get right over the next few years as we look at this. The first is, as that growth in cross-border continues, new capabilities are going to be required. And if you look at the investments that the large integrators have been making over the last few years, those investments have all been around easing the cross-border experience and creating the ability to provide a total landed cost and a very efficient cross-border. As I talk with clients around the world, one of the things that I hear clearly from our postal clients in particular is they want a green lane customs process, but they don't want the total landed cost element, because they're finding that customs agencies typically find about 10% of what they're supposed to. So it's a de facto price advantage that a post has against somebody that's offering a total landed cost, because that cost of customs and duties rarely gets baked in to the postal stream. That's going to change over time. As I talk with my customs counterparts, they're already starting to invest in technology that'll change that equation. And the integrators have realized that, and they're moving much faster than the postal players in this space right now. On the return side, this is one that I spend a lot of time talking with with retail clients, and the consistent message that I hear, particularly here in the U.S., is that they're being overwhelmed by the number of returns. They weren't expecting the volume that they're seeing come through today, and they're looking for very different sorts of solutions. My expectation is that we'll start to see those solutions evolve into redirection sorts of capabilities as they start to change that from a high cost center to an opportunity area where they can get product in the right place at the right time at the right price points. And we're also starting to see a lot of investment in alternative disposition of return. So not just bring it back to where you got it from, but is there something smart that can be done about it? The third one here, differentiated services. One of the clear things that we found in this research is that retailers are starting to now compete on a differentiated delivery experience. And if you look at how that has evolved over time, the first was around price, right, and taking cost out of the equation, right? So free shipping and what Amazon has done with that. The next was about speed, and so they were starting to then offer next day or 2 day at that free price point. The next level of competition that we're seeing, especially as we talk to these retail clients, is they're starting to offer differentiating shipping services as a competitive advantage in the market. I think as you hear what Cooper has to say about Amazon, you'll find that's clearly part of their strategy. And then the last is this focus on integration, of being able to very seamlessly connect the shipping experience with the buying experience, and the expectation that's being driven primarily by those that are using mobile devices to buy. If you look at research that UPS has just released, we released some about a year ago that corroborates that. What we're finding is that mobile commerce is growing rapidly, about 36% per year. It should be about half of e-commerce by 2018. And the expectation of those that are using a mobile device to buy is a very different expectation. They expect it to be a seamless, integrated experience that they can control from their phone in the same way that they're able to control the delivery. With that, thank you for your time. And if you have questions about this, as always, I'm happy to send you additional research or answer any questions. Just email me. Thank you.